Toronto Maple Leafs have made multiple shocking moves following two brutal losses. Craig Berube has come out and done some very interesting things. We're going to break that down as well as discuss some major injury updates surrounding Jake McCabe and Anthony Stolarz. We have a lot to go over today, but before we get into it, a quick reminder, if you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs content, so make sure to smash that subscribe button, and we will be live following tomorrow night's game, where hopefully they can get a win in a huge game against the Dallas Stars. But Darius, the Leafs are coming off of two brutal losses in a row, specifically the last game, and we saw Mitch Marner's comments saying they played well, they fought hard, which I disagree with, but at the end of the day, Craig Berube has come out, and we spoke about it in our stream. We talk about it in videos. They need to make some changes, whether that's, benching Morgan Rielly for a game. There's some talk about Austin Matthews. They didn't do that, but they did some very interesting things, and we're going to dive into some injury, stuff as well. But Steven Lorentz is now replacing Matthew Knies on the first line left wing. So Steven Lorentz is playing alongside Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner this morning, which is wild here. We're going to dive into the lines here in a second. But Darius, I just want to get your initial thoughts and also leave it down below. I don't know if Matthew Knies is necessarily the problem here, but they're changing something up. They're putting Steven Lorentz, bumping him up from the third/fourth line onto the first line. And it's quite frankly, this is probably the most shocking move that Craig Berube has made since he started coaching the Leafs this season.
I think it is, right? And I don't know if it's necessarily warranted in terms of, Matthew Knies' play. I don't think he's been that bad, especially the last little while. Since he's been called out by Craig Berube, he's been pretty good. But it's a shakeup nonetheless, and I think this team needs a bit of a shakeup after the last two games because you don't want to lose three in a row, and there's big potential for that against Dallas. So I think that they had to do something here. I really don't mind it. A lot of people were calling for this after game one of the season. Steven Lorentz should be on the top line. Again, I think he's great in his role. I don't know if this is going to stay throughout the game. But to start, we know what he brings, right? He can go get the puck for these guys. He can throw the body around. So he might be a decent complement piece for them. I don't think it sticks around, but this is just something to start shaking something up because, the last couple games have not gone well in a lot of areas, and you can't lose three in a row.
Yeah, huge game tomorrow. We say a lot of these games are important. I think this one is one of the most important games of the season just because losing three in a row would obviously be bad for the team morale, but in the Atlantic Division now, the Panthers are starting to catch up, and you don't really want to see, it's not early in the season anymore. We're, over halfway. They need to keep pressing and keep creating some space there. Let's dive into the lines a little bit. So it's, I like it for a couple reasons. It's a bit weird for one. So obviously Lorentz replaces Knies. You have Lorentz, Matthews, Marner. This makes tomorrow's game even more interesting, let alone the actual implications of the Dallas Stars and how good they are. But you now have a second line of Knies, Tavares, and Nylander, which I actually don't mind the dynamic of this second line in particular. It's very interesting to me. McMahon, Domi, Robertson on the third line. So now McMahon gets bumped down, and the lines have been changing like crazy over the past few weeks. And then the fourth line of Dewar, Camp, and Reeves. So you obviously have Reeves coming in. You have Pacioretty coming out of this, which is interesting as well. He was coming off of a really bad game. This is now his second missed game in the past 3 games. And Holmberg as well, who's not playing once again. His time in Toronto seems to be coming to an end. You also have OEL and Tanev together now with Rielly and Myers, of course, on the second line. So they're changing the blue line, not changing the pairings, but changing, of course, the order. There's a lot here. You also see Hakanpää's name, which we'll get into in a minute as well. But, Berube is just putting everything in a blender here, hoping that something sticks. But it's crazy. PTO for Steven Lorentz coming off of a 3-point season with the Cup-winning Panthers. He's now going to play a first-line game against one of the best teams in the NHL tomorrow night.
I think there's a lot to get into in terms of the offensive line. So I'll start with the defense because there's less there. I think the pairings, I've been saying throughout the season, whoever's first or second doesn't really matter because everyone's been playing kind of the same minutes. But Tanev is definitely this team's best defenseman. And I think they're definitely missing Jake McCabe a lot right now. So that's all I'll say about that. I think that there is something to the actual numbering of the pairings at this point. But I don't mind the first line. Lorentz starting there. We'll see what happens with that. The second line, I don't mind the dynamic of that either. You obviously keep that third line together. Pacioretty's out again, and I like what he's brought to the lineup so far this year, his physicality, all that. The last 2 games, he's looked kind of slow. Like the last 2 games he's played, he hasn't really had much of an impact, so he's not going to play if you don't have much of an impact. In terms of Holmberg, I think they might just keep him around. I don't know if another team is going to have too much interest in this player. They might just keep him around. If somebody gets hurt around playoff time like McMahon did last year, he might come in as an extra body who has played in the playoffs, has that experience. So I think at this point, that's what he is for this team because, again, he hasn't really figured it out under Craig Berube's system, but Pacioretty again on the outside looking in. He hasn't been too effective, so this is a bit of a wake up call for a lot of guys. You got to get going here. Nylander's got to get going again. Tavares, I thought, has had a great season so far. The third line thought they looked actually pretty good against the Vancouver Canucks. Maybe the only line that did anything. The only three guys that really did anything that night, but maybe minus Domi at that point too. But it's going to be interesting to see. It's a different dynamic heading into next game, and obviously Berube just needs something out of these guys.
Yeah, and you also have Nick Robertson in for the third game in a row. He's been playing well, playing better. And yeah, I mean, the third you also don't see Jake McCabe in here. We're gonna dive into some of the injury updates now. So the first thing we'll start with Yanni Hakanpää. He's back practicing with the Leafs. It's his first time that he's been participating in practice with the team since his procedure following his second game of the season. So this is big news. He might actually be returning. We know he's playing in the Four Nations Cup. Jake McCabe is back practicing with the main group despite not being on the line, so he probably doesn't play tomorrow. Maybe, Timmins is just in there either way. Once he returns, he will, in all likelihood, replace Connor Timmins, because Connor Timmins has been really bad over the past, really the past few weeks, but specifically over the past few games here. But Hakanpää Darius is also practicing, which very interesting. We'll get into Anthony Stolarz in a minute. I just want to get your thoughts on this. So it actually seems like there's a world where Hakanpää does play for the Leafs this season. McCabe is on his way back. He should be returning very soon. And again, we saw reports from, I think it was Nick Kyprios or Darren Dreger a few days ago saying that McCabe's going to come back soon. He was right. Shout out to him. And it seems like they're both going to be, returning at some point. Obviously, McCabe is the better player. He's going to be factoring in right away. But Yanni Hakanpää as well here. And it's going to be interesting to see how they manage this, whether they keep Rafai around, whether they keep, Connor Timmins around. It's going to be interesting.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, Connor Timmins will stay with the team. I just think in a perfect world, maybe he's not in the lineup come playoff time. We'll see. Maybe if he improves his play, he might be. But obviously, he started the year great, I thought. And since then, it's kind of trailed off a bit. But in terms of Yanni Hakanpää, personally, I'm kind of over it. Like, we'll see if he gets into the lineup again this year, maybe closer to the playoffs, right? If he's feeling better. He is on the roster for Team Finland for the Four Nations Cup, which I think is interesting. I don't know if he'll be ready in time. But if he is, then, if he's feeling better, then that's great. He'll be with the Leafs for the playoffs, and that's exactly why he got him. So that's great. But I'm kind of over it to the point that, we haven't seen him yet. He hasn't really made much of an impact. He had another procedure. So we'll see how this develops, but it's not looking too promising for me, although he is back on the ice. But, what does he look like in a game situation? So he's got to get back up to speed in that way. And Jake McCabe, they are missing this guy. This guy is a great defenseman. Obviously, when he signed his extension, a lot of people were on the fence about it. I don't know if anyone's still on the fence about it. This guy, they need this guy. He is such a big part of this team, and he brings so much to the lineup. So they desperately need him back. Doesn't look likely tomorrow, but it does look likely that he'll factor back into the lineup at some point this week.
Yeah, huge. The amount of changes today is crazy for a Monday. And again, there's some other things. Anthony Stolarz is progressing well, is expected to start skating on his own soon. This situation is unique because he underwent a procedure on his knee. The first step is always getting back on the ice. You can see here, there was hope he might be ready to play by the end of January, but early February can now be seen as more realistic. That's perfectly fine to me, as long as he's not going to be out for months and months, which isn't going to happen. Early February is what we've been predicting as well, and then you have the break with the Four Nations Cup, the All-Star break, all these different things, so he should be good to go soon, which is going to be huge for the Toronto Maple Leafs as well, because Hildeby's looked a bit shaky. Joseph Woll, a little bit shaky at times as well, pretty hit or miss there. In the power play units, you have Marner, Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Nyes, Riley, OEL, Robertson, Domingues. I'm going to be honest, with these power play units, I don't even think they just got to play better. You could switch everything up. You get the random players in there. They just need to actually play better. I know the coaching staff has been getting some flack. The power play has been absolutely terrible. They haven't gotten shots on net. The first two power plays in the last game against the Canucks had more shots on goal. So, however Berube wants to, switch up the personnel there, they need to just be better. And if they don't, then the team's going to continue to struggle there. And speaking of, Mark Savard is gathering and working with Leafs power play. They are back using the 5 forward first unit. So Darius, any quick thoughts on the power play? They just need to play better. They've been playing terrible. They have the personnel to be one of the better power plays. We saw it last season before the big fall off into a horrible power play in Boston. They fired Guy Boucher. They got Mark Savard, who is interesting, and they got some other power play guys there, and it hasn't been working quite well as of late. But they just need it. They'll figure it out, I think. It's just going to, if they want to keep him first in the Atlantic, they need to figure out the power play as soon as possible.
They're going to have to figure it out. That's, the fact of the matter. And I mean, I agree with you in terms of they could put anybody they want on this power play. You could put Simone Benoit on the power play, and, it wouldn't change anything with the way that they're playing. It's the personnel, right? It is the personnel. I don't think it's the coaching even. It's the mindset of the guys who are on the ice. There's no urgency out there. There's no killer instinct. They don't hate losing right now. Like, take advantage of these power plays. Got three of them against the Vancouver Canucks. Could have been 3-3, right? So take advantage of these opportunities. They're not doing that. I want to see more killer instinct. And Matthews talked a little bit about that post game against the Canucks. So hopefully they change that around. But I mean, if you get three power plays in a game, you got to score on at least one of them, right? Like, it's unacceptable. So it just has to look better. Throw pucks in that, do something. They're just so passive. It's really upsetting to watch with that much skill out there because they just pass it around, no urgency really, and then it results in a couple clearances and the power play's over. So they need some killer instinct on that power play, and they need to show it tomorrow because it's going to come up. It's going to have to come up big against Dallas.
Yeah, they've been very complacent, not only in the power play, just in general. They obviously got off to a very hot 5-game winning streak against weaker teams after Christmas, and they need to step it up. Bruce Boudreau spoke out in the struggling power play. I think sometimes you get too many good players. Of course, former head coach, not of the least, but in general for Bruce Boudreau, and they don't know their roles. They want to distribute the puck, and nobody wants to shoot the puck on every power play. You need a greedy player or two. I think that's the problem. They at least haven't found whether Morgan Rielly is the guy to be at the top or if they should use OEL. I think they should probably use OEL. I just think they don't really know what they're trying to accomplish, which is true. You look at it, it's a very passive power play. We see Mitch Marner, defer too much. He has a very solid shot. He's not as good as Austin Matthews, obviously, at scoring, but sometimes you got to play your role here, and they don't really have a role at this point. So hopefully they can figure this out, and tomorrow's going to be a massive game with a ton of storylines heading into it now. Steven Lorentz on the first line, and Lorentz also came out and said he's a little bit nervous, was a little bit nervous, but to play alongside two great players. So it's going to be interesting to see. I don't think he's as nervous now. Hopefully he's good to go for tomorrow. But let us know down below what your thoughts are. A ton of updates. We're going to keep you up to date with all the latest news. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. See you guys later.